Hi, I'm Katie, and welcome back to Rain or Shine Gardening. Today is a January garden tour, and I was kind of debating whether or not to do this just because I don't know, the garden's still sleeping right now, so I don't have a lot of blooms. But I do want to document what my garden looked like in January just for reference to look back on once things do start blooming. And I was thinking about some of the progress I've made already just since the last garden tour I did, which was in December, I believe. But we are starting a lot of projects, and I've already been planting, moving things around. Things look really different, and I've got a lot more projects to go. I've got a couple cherry trees here in the front of my garden that I'm going to be trimming way back. Doing that fruit tree pruning is good to do right now when they're dormant, and that will change the look of the garden. I've got my rose garden redo project that's happening. I just got lines painted for my border that's going to be going in. So as soon as I get that metal edging, I'm going to be putting that in my garden, and that's going to make a big difference of what things look like too. So I thought it's worth it to get out here, even though it is, January. Like I said, I don't have a lot of blooms. I do have some things popping up already, like my daffodils. I can actually see blooms forming on my daffodils, which is probably the earliest that we've ever had some of our spring bulbs come out. So excited to see what is maybe surprising as we walk along for the garden tour, and then be able to compare once February comes around the way things are going for spring bulbs and how warm it is here. I bet in my February garden tour I will probably have some spring bulbs blooming. Let's get started. I might have a few things to show in my back garden, but I don't have much going on back there right now either. But again, it's all about documenting to be able to show and compare and look back in the future. So let's get started with January's garden tour. All right, to start out the garden tour for the month of January, I'm going to start down here in the bottom front corner of my garden because this has seen a lot of change already. I'm not always that great at remembering the names of things, but I'm going to do my best to make sure to put them on the screen in case you are like me and you see something that you want and you need to know what variety it is. So I'm going to try to pop that in. But this whole corner we redid as of December and January. So we've got a moonglow juniper down here in front, and then a dwarf blue atlas cedar. And this is a columnar oak, and it's not supposed to get too tall, but like I mentioned in a previous video, it's leaning, so I am going to be staking that here pretty soon. I did get a few plants here along the side of the border of my garden, and then a couple other things that bring some color, like this carex grass and another blue star juniper, and some of that beautiful purple red heuchera. So this area looks really different. We took out that weeping cherry tree that used to be in the corner, and I've been layering some winter interest here on this side ever since. And I know I'm super late to get them in the ground, but I bought some spring bulbs because I thought this would be a really pretty space to put some daffodils and some tulips in. So I do need to get those in the ground as soon as possible. I probably won't record it just because it's going to be a fast pop it in the ground type situation. But that's something that I need to get done soon here. So I garden here in zone 8B in the Pacific Northwest, and we typically see snow once in a while during the winter or some frozen temperatures, but we don't get hard freezes that last a long time. This year has been unusually warm. It's really interesting to see what that's done to my garden because I have spring bulbs popping up. You can see here this daffodil even has a bud that's forming. So that's why I was mentioning, I think by my February garden tour, I might have some blooms to be showing here in this front garden. But because it's been warm too, one thing that I noticed the other day is that we're not getting any dieback of some of the weeds. So I need to come through here and clean up some of the leaves and clean up some weeds. But also another thing is our moss is going crazy. Everything is green, all of our surfaces. The approach up to my front doorstep, our concrete there is all green. All my bricks are green. And it's just something that is a little bit unusual compared to some of the previous years. So walking along here, I've got some lamb's ear I need to get cut back and some gara that grows up huge. I might try to actually get some starts off of that this year, but I cut it all the way back down to the ground. And a couple other new things that I planted. I think this was a red star, if I'm remembering the name right. And then I've got my Primo Arbovita here from Isley Nursery in the front of my bed. And I've got a Final Fire Japanese maple from Isley Nursery as well. And I've got a Chinese dogwood here in the front. And then a thundercloud flowering plum. So I'm excited to see this area in springtime. And I've got a lot more bulbs popping up. I did notice primarily it's my daffodils. So that's what a lot of these are that are popping through. I do have quite a few tulips planted in these beds too. So tulips don't come back as well as daffodils do for us in this area, but they do come back okay for me. And I do see just the tops of a lot of my tulips starting to poke through, but it probably will take a little while for more of those. I do see some holes too where it's pretty apparent that something's been digging in the garden trying to go for the bulbs. I don't know if you can see clearly on camera, but there's a few different holes in this area. So typically we don't have too many problems with things eating our bulbs or digging them up too badly. So walking across the front of my garden again, you'll see all these daffodils that are poking up through the ground. Again, that's kind of early to see this many coming through here in January. Typically we don't see those popping through until a little bit later. So this is the front corner of my garden, and from what you can see here, we've got all kinds of green weeds growing everywhere. And again, that's just kind of the uniquely warm winter that we've had so far. It's just making everything continue to grow, whereas when we get a little bit of cold, some of those die back. So we'll see how that goes for the weeds this season. But I did get a few new things planted recently in this bed. I have another blue star juniper and some heuchera that are growing pretty well. Those are bigger than they were when I planted them in the fall. And I've got some lemon cypress that I planted here. I have a little triangle of them, and these were 50% off trees from a local garden center that were advertised as being holiday trees. But after the holidays, they marked them down. And so I bought quite a few. I bought 9 actually, because they were so inexpensive. I think they were only like $5 a piece. But I thought this area of my garden here alongside my driveway could use some little pops of chartreuse. And I love the lemon cypress in the other areas of my garden. So I just added some of those in. Now you can see my lamb's ear is fading and it's not looking great, which is typical for the winter time. So I need to come in and cut that back and pull it away from some of the other perennials I have so it doesn't choke some things out. I might actually dig some out and relocate it to some other areas of the garden because it really spreads. It really likes this space. Here in the center of the screen, I have a lilac, and it blooms, I think it's a light lavender, maybe even white. And it was pretty small, maybe a foot tall when I planted it here. And I'm really excited for this to get bigger and grow because the smell is so amazing when it blooms in the springtime. And it's actually a really pretty tree to have even after it's blooming with the green foliage here in this space. And again, it's kind of that medium deep green color for the leaves. So having those lemon cypress around it and then the blue lamb's ear, it really kind of helps have some additional contrast. But you can see the buds are really starting to swell, and I'm excited because hopefully that means that a lot of these buds will have blooms on it this spring. So it'll probably be the most bloomed out that it has been so far since I've had it. I've got a little ginkgo tree here also, and some peonies that I've cut back. A lot of tulips and daffodils planted in these beds also, so that'll be pretty. I like having this little miniature ginkgo here. It adds in some interesting leaf structure and shape. Kind of in the upper corner of my garden, close to my driveway where my front walkway is. And this is where I planted another triad of those lemon cypress next to this bird bath that we have in this space. And I can see a lot of things already coming up. I have a bunch of the purple prince tulips, I believe it is, from the Wooden Shoe tulip farm planted around this bird bath. And so those are going to be really pretty when they come up and bloom. And we planted a bunch of crocus in this area, and I can see that they're starting to come up also, which is weird because I already have daffodils with blooms, but my crocus are just starting to pop up through the dirt. So I don't know. Timing is just kind of off this year for some things, so it'll be interesting to see how things turn out. So here in January, the front of my house and the front upper garden here is under construction. And if you saw my last video, I talked about drawing out these pathways and kind of waiting for that metal edging to come in so that I can create my garden beds distinct from the walkways and kind of work on that project. So this is a big project for 2026 that I talked about in my goals for this year. I'm going to be redoing my anniversary rose garden. So come along with me on that journey. It's a lot of work to redo garden beds, but I'm going to be so happy with the final product, and I can't wait to sit on our sunset bench there in the corner once this is completed and just enjoying all the roses and the view of the garden. So walking around the front of the garden, you can see here that I'm going to be having a new walkway entrance coming out to the front, and that's where the bench is. You can see some of the drip system that we pulled out just to be able to work on this project here. So this is all going to look really different over the months, and it's going to be important to have this documented to look back on too. But here in these front pots, I have some Shishigashira Japanese maples. I have one on each side, and they seem to be doing well in the pots. They're budded up, ready to leaf out once it gets a little warmer. And hopefully I can get some flowers to underplant in here. But I think those will be really pretty, kind of flanking this new walkway. I have some things planted that were under the bench, so I'm just going to be moving those in the future. But since I don't have my spot ready for them yet, I'm just going to leave them in the ground until I'm closer to being ready. This is something new that I just got in the ground the other day, and it is a Limelight Standard, and it is by Proven Winners, and I got this on a really good clearance discount from a garden center last year at the end of the summer season. And so the reason I wanted to plant this here is because it matches the one that I have on the other side of my garden. You can see it right there. So looking at the front of the house, it will be kind of a balanced view of having the standard hydrangea over here and then having the one that kind of leads you in this direction on this side of the house. So this area is all still under construction for the most part, and it will include a lot of roses as I'm building out my anniversary rose garden. And I had the most odd experience the other day where I actually mowed my lawn in January. It was just after the first of the year, and I don't ever remember a time of mowing my lawn in January. Usually the grass goes pretty dormant and we don't have a lot of growth, but this year I had to mow it. It does look really nice and tidy, which is great. And the grass was nice to add to my compost pile, even though it's not very warm for my compost right now, but it did tidy up the garden and make it look really nice, even for January. So this area in my garden is going to look a little different in the coming weeks because these are 2 cherry trees. And I didn't do much pruning for height last year. I kind of let them go because they had dealt with some, I think they're called black cherry aphids the year before, where they completely got defoliated. They got black leaves all over them from these bugs that just kind of ravaged them. So I let them kind of grow on last year without doing too much pruning because I didn't want to cause them any more stress than they already had. So this year I'm going to do a lot of work on pruning, making sure I am pruning them for structure but also for height. So I want to be able to reach the cherries that grow on them, and right now they're getting very tall. The tree on the left is a dwarf Bing cherry, so it won't get too tall compared to the tree on the right. The one on the right is a full-size Rainier cherry. And the reason I have two is because they are both varieties that require cross-pollination. So if I only had one cherry tree, I'm not going to get any fruit. It does require that I have a pair at least of them to be able to cross-pollinate and get that fruit. More to come on my fruit tree pruning. I'm also going to be spraying them with copper fungicide and a neem oil to make sure that they are protected from pests and diseases as we approach the upcoming season, which is good to do in the season when they're dormant. Okay, this is another area that looks really different in my garden compared to some past months because we removed another tree. Here I had a fruit salad tree, and you can see the small stump. We need to get that cut out a little bit more, or a little better, down towards the soil level. But I got this red bud planted, and I don't know if you can see the structure of it very well from here. That might be a little easier. But I'm so excited to see this grow up and grow out in this area and create this pretty little canopy for this garden bed. I've got a walkway here that I never really settled in or leveled up, so that might be a project for this year too, is to work on that. I did do quite a bit of perennial cutback in this bed when I pulled out some of my annuals, but I still have some things to work on. Some kind of bulb that I planted way back when that's coming up, and I might try to pull those out. I've got a big clump of grass that's coming up over in this area. Here, I'll walk over here so we can see it a little bit better. But I have a big clump of grass, so I actually want to dig down and try to get quite a bit of the roots out of that area because I do not want this bed to be full of grass, and once grass grows, it really spreads quickly, it seems. So I've got some additional perennial cutback to do in this area. I've got foxglove back here that have reseeded themselves. You can see some of the green already growing down below those. I've got GMs on both sides. That's what these are. Really pretty tangerine GMs. Got some daisies and some ajuga. I want to make sure my ajuga is not covered up. And then some euphorbia here that has really pretty lime green flowers when it blooms. And along the fence line here, I kind of alternate some of the Italian cypress and lemon cypress. And it just brings kind of a nice backdrop along the fence line of color. Some are bigger than others. I need to probably come in and do a little bit of pruning on those to make sure they're going to stay nice. I do have some grass that's spreading a little bit, and this is a really good time for me to come in and make sure that I'm pulling all of that out and staying on top of it because I don't want that to take over. I also planted this dappled willow was that in December? I think it was in December. And I have not had one, but I always love how those look in the springtime, so I'm really excited for that to bloom. And then walking through to the end of this garden bed, I have my snowball tree in this area. And you can see I did cut out quite a bit of dead growth in years past. And so a lot of these are newer, younger branches. But I really like how it's growing up and kind of creating the shape that it is now. This is a pretty new garden bed. I just put this in last April. And I've got some lambs here I need to cut back. An artichoke that looks like it's giving some new growth at the base of it, so that's exciting. I've got some lavender. I've got a big peony there that's close to the base of the snowball tree. I've got some eucalyptus, baby blue eucalyptus on both sides of the snowball tree, and I loved using those in my cut bouquets this last year, so really like having those as a part of the garden. This part of the fence line is going to look really different this year too. So right now, this might be the last month that these roses are all in the ground over here in this bed, because I'm going to be digging them out and moving them over to my rose garden. And I think I might use this space for dahlias next year. So I kind of had them sprinkled all over in my front garden last year, and it was really hard to keep them supported enough because it was at a slope. But if I plant them here by the fence, this is a really level, flat area, and it would be kind of nice just to have this as a little dahlia patch. So that's something I have in mind for this year, and we'll see how it ends up turning out. So looking back over to this side of the garden, this is a big project area. I have all of this that I need to get under control. This is just completely taking over my garden, and I planted it voluntarily myself, but I think that it's crocosmia. I think that if I knew what I know now about how it spreads and kind of takes over and what it looks like, I would not have planted this at all. So I know that I need to come in and dig out all those rhizomes. They kind of look like little bulbs, just to try to recover this space in my garden. I might put some hostas and things like that in, but I don't want this here in my garden anymore. But it's not as easy as just cutting it back, because you have to dig out all those little tiny bulbs. So it's a lot of work. I know I need to work on that this year. So my garden is very muddy. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we get a lot of rain. So I'm always in boots, and I hesitate walking through this area too much because I know it's really squishy and I don't want to do too much damage to my grass. But sometimes I do walk through here still to get to my backyard. You can see my rhododendron, which was here when we moved in, and it blooms a really pretty bright pink, and I can't wait to see it this season. It's just a really nice thing that we have decided to leave here because we like how it looks. I've got a lot of hellebores around the garden in different places. Some are already blooming and some have yet to bloom. I've got my fountain all tucked in right now, and I just did another video on cutting back my grapes. So those are trimmed back and ready for this next year. And I also trained a grape along the top of this fence line. So we'll see how that turns out this year too. So last year, part of my winter interest video was planting some lemon cypress and then this blue evergreen here in the middle. And before, it was just black fence in the winter. It was pretty lacking of color. So this year it does look pretty. I've got some heather blooming here under the fountain too, which is nice to have a little bit of color from something. I have a forsythia planted back here behind this white bench, and a couple arbovita that will grow up. And then this is a hydrangea that I got from my grandma. So I've not cut back the old blooms on that, but you do have to be careful if you're going to be doing any trimming on it, not to trim off the buds, because it has already set its buds for blooms next year. This is one space I have a bunch of hellebore planted, and these I got on a clearance for $3 a piece from a big box store at the end of the season one year. And I was like, ooh, let me pick those up. I think they were regular $30 each. So it was a really great deal that I was like, I will find a place for these. And you can see that the buds are pushing up through the dirt, and these are going to be really pretty when they bloom. I don't have too much going on in my backyard right now. It is very, very wet and soggy. Just because we're lower in elevation than a lot of our neighbors, we get a lot of the rain runoff that comes down into our yard. We do have some French drains and some ways to divert some of the water, but it still gets pretty wet and soggy back here. So I don't have a lot to show for the backyard, but I'll walk you through and show you a couple spaces. I did do a project recently where I planted a bunch of bulbs in this area of my garden. I have a bunch of Culner apple trees planted. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 total, and they alternate red, yellow for the apples. And then I have a bunch of clematis planted back here too. I also have nepeta in here as far as perennials go, and then I usually fill this bed in with annuals, and it brings a lot of pretty color back to the space. but I planted a ton of daffodils over here. So I'm really excited to see those when they start to pop up. The daffodils that are already coming up in my front yard are daffodils that I've planted in a previous year. So I don't expect that these will pop up through the soil quite as quickly as those others that were already in the ground, but hopefully we'll get a good show out of them. Okay, and then walking over to this corner of my garden, I have my hornbeam tree here, and it is really pretty all year long. It does hold on to some leaves in the winter, like you can see, but as soon as the new leaves start pushing out in the spring, it drops the rest of those brown leaves. And I have quite a bit of work to do in this space. I have a nice little patch of iris back here that I inherited from my aunt gave it to me, and it came from my grandma and my great-grandma's yard. So that's fun to have in my space. But I really want to see if I can plant out some additional annuals or some other things in this garden bed. You can look down this long garden space here and see that I have my berry beds. So these are my black satin blackberries that I planted this last year. And I need to make sure to get those tied up so that when they start to leaf out, they will be organized and not just a big bramble of branches. And then not much else going on in my raised beds except my garlic. Can you see the green tips poking through down there? The garlic is doing really well. So let me walk down there. Before we get to the garlic, I did plant some bulbs in these pots, and this cabbage is kind of at the end of its life here, and I know my chickens will enjoy it. So I am going to empty these pots soon. It looks like some kind of bug has already been enjoying some of it, but I'll make sure to take those out and then top these up with a little bit of soil and give some space and room for the bulbs to come up. I have hyacinth, daffodil, and tulips planted in these two pots. So that should be pretty back here in the backyard. And then I have the garlic. So I did give a little update the other day on my garlic, and it has grown since then even. But this is my grocery store garlic experiment. So I was late to the game in buying garlic seed, to buy it through a plant company, a seed company. So I said, what the heck, let me try buying it from a grocery store and just planting it and seeing if it works. Because it's kind of hit and miss whether they use growth inhibitors or things like that on garlic that you buy in the store. So I didn't know if this was going to be very successful, but I think a combination of our warm winter that we've had and then making sure to top this up with a lot of compost and then making sure to feed it really well when I planted it, it is doing exceptionally well. Maybe the best sprouting rate and the healthiest looking garlic that I've ever planted. So this might be a repeat next year. We'll see how it ends up turning out. All right, I think that is it for my garden tour. I'm over by my chickens. They're looking at me for some treats, so I think I need to give them some treats. I do have a lot of other fruit trees like behind me. I've got a pear espalier, so I'm going to be also treating that with the spray like I do for all my fruit trees in the wintertime. But the rest of my garden is still pretty sleepy. And next time I will take you through and show you even more developments of some of our projects, of some of the things we have growing. And rain or shine, I will see you next time.